morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management. Happy to have you with us. Great response to our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge yesterday. Still getting people kind of signed up for that. We'll continue to do that. More on that throughout our show here today. 1 day away from the Dogs back in March Madness. That is a lot of fun. Spring practice is ongoing. A little bit of a fiery rant from Kirby Smart yesterday. That will be a part of our discussion today. And, boy, I tell you this, I am excited about the Georgia defensive line, or at least what it has the potential of being here this year. Looking forward to that. I am not seeing the show on DawgNation.com. So apparently we're having a little bit of an issue there at DawgNation.com. We might want to see about that. Let me check over here on the YouTube side of things. That also, I guess, could be me, but I believe we're having maybe an issue there at DawgNation.com. Let's try YouTube and see how that is going here today. Of course, everybody hopefully getting ready for a fun time here. Yeah, appears we're on YouTube, maybe a little DawgNation.com issue. Roger Johnson checking in from Dalton, beautiful part of the state, up there in the north part of the state, gorgeous. Driven through there many times, great spot. Thomas T-Bone checking in on the YouTube side to say hi, BA, appreciate that. Foster Moss encouraging folks, hit the like button. Appreciate that. Anything you can do to help us share the show and get more people out there knowing what we're doing on a daily basis, of course we appreciate that. So how about this? The full sort of like length of the state represented here. You got Roger up in Dalton, and you got Hooks fam checking in from Thomasville. So on one side and on the other, top to bottom, and of course our buddy Randy Payne checking in from Tifton, Georgia. Randy, a big part of our Dog Nation cruise. Motivated, dedicated, says Kirby Smart's pushing those players to be elite. Yeah, no doubt about that. Also a little entertaining for us. We'll give you that here coming up in just a couple of minutes. Foster Moss also checking in to do some good stuff, so you love that. We'll say hello to some people on Facebook here for a moment, too. And hopefully we'll get our Dog Nation stuff kind of squared away here in a minute. But as I said before, getting ready for a fun show. By the way, Davin Bellamy not with us today, but for a very good reason, which we will tell you about on the show. So that is also exciting stuff here, too. Jeremy Cromer checking in on Facebook. Appreciate that. Good to see Troy Green. Gino Hernandez. Tree checking in. Appreciate that. Bo Bridges checking in. Kent Holcomb from the North Georgia Mountains. You appreciate that. Keith Bradshaw showing up there as well. Michael Baxter saying hello today. Jay Swain doing that too. So all of that is very, very good. Okay. Should be DawgNation.com should be there if it's not. That maybe that's my issue. Let me just see if I can get out and try to. Okay. So if it's not there yet on DawgNation.com, should get there. So if you're normally a Dog Nation viewer, we should have you rocking and rolling there in just a couple of seconds. Let's see what else is on everybody's mind here before we get ready to get going and begin the show here today. West GA Dog fan, he says, I'm jumping over here until the Dog Nation side is fixed. Yeah, it'll be back up next couple of minutes. So if you like watching it live over there, you'll get a chance to do that. Although West GA, it seems like we do see you on YouTube sometimes. But, yeah, it'll be back up over there at some point. DSG B84 also checking in from Cairo, Georgia, down there in syrup maker territory. Let's see what else. Texas Dog says, why did I move to Athens if G-Day is in question? So Texas Dog did live out there in the Lone Star State, moved back over here, and disappointed about what might be kind of an uncertain future for G-Day. And look, as we said yesterday, we've sort of said everything that can be said about this. Obviously, I'm not happy about it. I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, I'm just sort of ready to give all that up. We've sort of said our piece, and we'll see where it goes. James Ansari says, I'm still recovering from the Sugar Bowl, and I do get that. Obviously, losses that in seasons are always going to be a little painful. You understand that. Light Dog checking in from Savannah. Appreciate that. DMart 42 pointing out something that was not lost on me either, DMart. The notion that Kirby's rant yesterday is sort of a paint by numbers, kind of a sort of a re-racking. So sort of like the show that's been on for a few years, and they just sort of bring back a storyline they've kind of done before. Sort of feels like this is familiar turf, but it's still fun. And so we'll do some of that here coming up in just a little bit. And in fact, let's fire up the animation. We'll tell you all about the show today, and we'll get ready to get it started. Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management. We are happy to have you with us for it. Getting closer to the Bulldogs versus Bulldogs tomorrow in the NCAA tournament. Georgia trying to pull that upset against Gonzaga. We'll talk to Mike Griffith live from Wichita, Kansas today, the site of the game, about what we'll expect to see from Georgia against Gonzaga tomorrow. Davin Bellamy, typically on a Wednesday, not today. Davin's got great news in his life. We'll tell you about that more coming up in a moment, and we'll provide some good news that we still think Davin's going to be with us coming up in future weeks, just not today. We also had a very busy day of news yesterday when it comes to Georgia spring practice. Heard from 7 different players. One of those we're going to highlight here on the show today, and also just for fun, because it's about time for us to be doing this. It seems like it happens around this time each and every year. Kirby Smart, pretty fiery rant yesterday, or at least forceful with his words about what he was not happy about when it comes to the Georgia spring practice. So we'll throw it out there. It seems like we do this a lot, and it's about time to do that here for this year. So what do you say we get it started? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management, the official pest control of UGA Athletics.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Let me begin with a quick word of thanks. The last couple of days in the show, we've joked a little bit. And let's not try to be self-deprecating. I just think it's, the right way to be. I don't want to, take myself too serious or anything like that. But we've sort of joked about what was a year ago, sort of a little bit of a haphazard, just kind of thrown together bracket contest, not official, corporate, thing. We're not, Warren Buffett giving $1 billion away or anything like that. We were just going to do something for fun. We had a great response, and I sort of joked about what people want to do it again this year. And I tell you, the enthusiastic response to all of this has it's been terrific. I really appreciate it. It's one of those things. I just like the fact that the audience sort of gets it, that, hey, we're just trying to have fun. We're trying to make, everything as enjoyable as we possibly can. Y'all seem to be right there on the same page with all of that. So we've had a great response already in just our first day. And coming up in a moment, I'm going to give you an invitation again to be a part of this bracket contest. We're going to do something for the winner, and we're going to try to do something for at least the first couple of hundred people who sign up for it. Beyond that, I can't make a ton of promises, but at least for the first couple hundred, we're going to try to do something nice for you. So we'll tell you more about that coming up. But sure enough, off the top, and this is as sincere as I'm capable of being, I really appreciate, very, very thankful for the fact that you'd want to do this and be a part of the fun, because honestly, March Madness, the tournament's one of my favorite things, and the fact that Georgia's back in it again this year, I would say makes that even more so. So more on that coming up in a moment, but just sort of a word of thanks off the top of the program today. Now, to get into the content here for a moment, busy day around Georgia spring practice yesterday. Heard from Kirby Smart, heard from 7 different Georgia players. We don't have time to play all of that for you here today, but we'll spread it out and give you some of that in the upcoming days, because a lot of it was very good. In fact, if you want to jump ahead of me and go to the DawgNation YouTube page, if you want to watch a lot of this, the one thing that I felt like was kind of a through line, a narrative thread that connected a lot of these interviews together, man, there was some honest talk. Honest talk about personal introspection. You're going to hear some of that in a moment. Honest talk about kind of where things stand for, various players. I just thought there was some real interesting honesty. Not to say that it would ever be dishonest, but you know what I'm saying? Sometimes when you hear something that really sounds like the truth, it just sort of sticks out and sounds a little different. I thought we got a lot of that from some Georgia players yesterday. I thought it was just a lot of fun. So we'll give you a lot of that, including in a couple of minutes here, one player in particular that's really talking up some of the guys in his position group, and it may be among the most important position groups for Georgia overall here this season. That's coming up in a moment. Prior to that, let's focus on Kirby Smart. And I was joking with our video audience. We do a little show before the actual show begins, and one of our commenters made mention of the fact that it sort of seems like about every year at this time, a storyline that sort of gets re-racked. It's kind of a plot point that just sort of gets recycled, is the idea that Kirby Smart's not happy. Kirby Smart didn't get the effort that he wanted from a Georgia spring practice. It sort of feels like we've done that, I guess, every single year. And I'm like some of you in that at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, now it's time to do this. And, this is the thing that this is going to be about here today. And I'm not saying that I'm bored by it or anything like that. I'm just saying that it just sort of feels like very familiar turf to both me and you. And yet there was something about what we got from Kirby yesterday that I thought was still pretty meaningful, even in light of the fact that, okay, well, it's this year's turn to be nobody's in shape and nobody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And, the kids these days and blah, blah, blah. I still thought, even though this sort of feels like the kind of thing we've done in the past, that there was something that I think you take away from this. And if you are of the hope and belief that Georgia as a program still has defining characteristics that make it different than other programs, maybe some of that was found within what we heard from Kirby Smart yesterday. Let me give you the setup for it, and then I'm going to play you a couple of clips. The setup is Kirby Smart was like, these guys are not in shape. They're huffing and puffing. They're not moving the way they need to move, and it's just like I said before. That's just sort of the thing that Kirby Smart said, and it is, I would say, pretty easy to understand. We've heard a lot of former players say this of like, hey, when you first get to Georgia, well, obviously you look like you're in shape. But when you are pushed beyond your limits, you sort of find out what real physical conditioning is all about. And we've heard other players say that, so these players just the latest to experience that. But when it comes to demanding more from practice and having players pushing each other to do that, Kirby was asked a question about, cultivating leadership and how you get players to both lead with their words, but also maybe in this case, given the previous comments about physical conditioning, things like that, how do you get the right guys to lead by example and sort of show you what the proper demeanor is for a Georgia player? And that's when Kirby kind of got, I think, very specific about this particular team, perhaps even the practice that Smart had just observed. This obviously taking place last night on Tuesday evening. Smart got a little bit specific about what exactly he did not like, and the description that he provided. What makes this interesting is this is the fear that some fans have about what college football is in this day and age in which we live in. And at least for a brief moment, Kirby Smart kind of leaned into that with, hey, let me tell you what I saw today that I did not like. And Georgia fans who hear Smart's words, they won't like this either. This is Kirby from yesterday.
No, we have to coach it. I mean, that's what they get. That's what they pay us to do, to coach them. They have to be willing to receive coaching. And on the whole, my whole preach after the practice was we got a lot of guys that put their hands up. They're offended when you coach them. I'm not talking about the freshmen. I'm talking about in general. So we had multiple NFL coaches come through here, go to practice, and, they talk about how their players love to be coached. They love to be given a nugget, a technique that might help them play longer or play better. And some of our guys are offended by it. It's like, you're coaching me hard? Like, you're telling me I got to play with effort? And some of them, I guess, have never been held to that standard, but that standard is not going to change here.
Man, I think that's such an important thing for a handful of reasons. First of all, Georgia fans, for the most part, love this sort of thing of, heck yeah, Kirby, coach them up, show them what they need to do. And I'm not any different on that. It sort of sounds good to hear the coach saying those kinds of things, even if a version of this sort of feels like turf that we've traveled in the past. It still sort of sounds good to hear that. But in the midst of everything that's going on in college football right now, I think the point that Smart is trying to reinforce there is incredibly important. We live in a day and age which above the table, on the record, players are getting compensation. But as we've said before, compensation alone does not make you a professional. When you say, and this is a phrase we've heard used before, maybe you've used it before, maybe it's been used about you before. Oh, so-and-so is a real pro. I made this point the other day on the show. So-and-so is a real pro. When we call somebody a pro, when we give them that compliment, we're not referencing their compensation, because your compensation is not what makes you a professional. It's the way in which you go about your work that makes you a professional. In other words, if you want to be a podcast host or a writer or a coach or whatever else, you can sort of conduct your business as a professional would, and eventually compensation may flow your way because of that. That you can act like a pro before you get paid. And if you do, eventually you will get paid. But if you get paid and don't act like a pro, so to speak, pretty soon you won't be getting paid anymore. And that's what's really, really important, that the kind of weird world which we live in now is that players are being paid for their potential. They are being paid for the athletic potential that kind of lives inside of them. It's sort of like, if I buy raw land because I think it's got a lot of mineral, in the ground, oil or, natural gas, whatever else. You watch Landman on, Paramount or something like that, you sort of get that, hey, I'm purchasing this raw land because I think there's some mineral rights here that I'm going to be, have access to that are going to be really, really valuable. In some respects, that's what we're paying players for right now. We're paying them for the potential of their highest and best use of what they might be. But, if all it ever is potential, then the compensation the players are getting in their lives is not going to last very long. And when it's all said and done, I don't know that the memories of, back when I was getting big dollars when I was just coming into college, I actually don't know that those memories will be pleasant ones if they're also not being paid well in the future. It may kind of live to torment them a little bit about, what might have been and what was for a brief moment in their life. But that's probably a different topic for a different day. So when Kirby Smart says, we are going to coach you hard to turn your potential into performance, actually doing the Georgia players a favor by doing that, whether they understand that or not. And then beyond that, there's this. And this is also something we mentioned the other day. Because there's all this controversy right now about should there be spring games or not. And at this point in time, we have said all we're going to say about that. We have been very forceful in our frustration about the way in which this is involving at Georgia in particular. But at a certain point, we've just sort of said it all. But there are also some coaches that not only want to do away with spring games, it's been said on the record, or at least in some cases, even on background, but often on the record, there are some coaches that would also, in addition to doing away with spring games, they'd do away with spring practices. They wouldn't have this stuff. They'd have more of the NFL-style OTAs. But our response back to that is, well, the NFL-style OTA, we're just sort of going through some sort of walkthroughs and stuff like that. This is for guys who are in their 30s, late 20s. These are true professionals who've been playing football for a very long time. If you don't practice young football players, what are they going to look like in the fall? And if you are so worried about losing them in the transfer portal or something like that, that you're willing not to coach them so that you don't lose them via transfer, then in a roundabout way, as a coach, you are telling me something about the value that you perceive yourself to have. And your influence is obviously overrated if you're not willing to coach them. And if your influence is overrated, you're also overpaid. So when Smart says at the beginning of that statement, hey, this is what they pay us to do, I don't think of that as a throwaway line, that I want the kind of coach that says, hey, I still have value. And I want the kind of coach from my favorite team that says, I know how talented you are, but if you just do it your way, the way that you've always done it, the results that you get will be meager. And this newfound compensation that you're enjoying is not going to last very long. And it's not going to last certainly as long as you want it to. So the Kirby doctrine, as we've said before, has always been find talented players, find a way to make them physically and mentally tougher, more ready for the kind of battle that college football provides, and you have a chance at success. And the fact that even in this sort of NIL age that we live in now, that's not changing to a lot of Georgia fans, at least based on the word that Smart's using, it's not changing. To a lot of Georgia fans, I do think they take a good bit of comfort in that. Now, Smart was also asked, okay, well, this idea of players are throwing up their hands and they're offended by getting coaching. Smart was asked, is this getting worse because of this NIL era? It's a fair question. This is the answer that Smart gave about that yesterday.
Yeah, if it makes it about the NIL era, then there'll be nobody successful. It's picking the right people to coach. Kids that want to be coached don't care what they make. I mean, the guys in the National Football League make more than these guys, and they still want to be coached. So it's not a relatively new thing. I think it's more prevalent than it's been. It's just not new. I mean, guys have always maybe not been used to being coached and being corrected, especially at the volume and level of which we do things. But I think they'll get there. I mean, if they won't, then somebody else will be in their spot.
So, I mean, the important statement about all this is, or at least the next important statement after what we've already said, is at the end of that, and we can't play the whole press conference here right now, but you can go to the DawgNation YouTube page and watch it in its entirety. There was a lot of like restating of what Smart says there at the end. Hey, these guys are going to get there. I think they will, and if they don't, we'll find somebody else. But there was a lot of, listen, I'm not trying to say these guys won't. In other words, this wasn't a sheer condemnation of the players or the kids these days and all of that. There wasn't a lot of that. It was, I wasn't happy with this practice here right now, but I believe these players have a chance to be very good if they will accept the coaching that we're willing to provide. And I think the fact that there isn't going to be, at least in terms of these public statements, any sort of compromise on, I don't care how talented you think you are and how talented your paycheck would suggest you might be, you are not talented enough to do it on your own, your way, and have that last very long. Because college football has always been, will always be hard. That when you step on this field and you battle somebody, whether it be in practice or in a game, that's as physically gifted as you are, at a certain point you can't just lean on your talent to get you through that. You got to have some technique. You got to have some strategy. You've got to have some knowledge of the game. And frankly, people in their 40s have a lot more of that than people in their teens or people in their early 20s. The more experience provides more knowledge. And if you want to win the battle against somebody who physically looks just like you, the knowledge that you possess will give you the extra edge there. And you don't get that knowledge just by standing around. You get that knowledge from listening to good, hard, tough coaching. So some of this sort of feels like what we've heard from coaches in the past, what we've heard certainly from Kirby Smart in the past. But there's also a specific twist on this that sort of feels like very, very of the moment that we're in. NIL, players getting paid, players maybe not expecting to be pushed very hard. Kirby Smart says, listen, I don't care how much the sport's changing. I'm not changing. I'm still going to push you. But not because I hate you, because I love you, and because the knowledge that I have and the place I can take you is where you want to go. This is sort of what spring practice is all about. It's one of the reasons why I'm glad spring practice still exists. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. Glad you are with us, whether it's video 10 a.m., radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, the various podcast platforms. What a success story that is. We put our mind to getting that podcast issue fixed, and I tell you, it's been humming very smoothly here right now. So every now and then, things kind of fall into place for you. I certainly am glad about that. And so for all of you, just finding a platform that works, being a part of our show, spring practice, fall camp, during the season, recruiting times of year, just so thankful and happy to have you doing all of that. And so grateful to our friends at Breda Pest Management who make it all possible, the official pest control provider of UGA Athletics. Hopefully we're back at Sanford Stadium coming up in a couple of weeks for G-Day. Certainly hoping to be that way. And when you're there, when you're looking around, you're kind of wondering, hey, how does this place stay bug and critter free? Who keeps this place termite free? Who keeps the mosquitoes out of this place? You know, think about that kind of thing. All of that for Sanford Stadium done by our friends at Breda Pest Management. And they can provide the same level of service for you. And they can provide that level of service to you for a better price than whatever fly-by-night company you might be working with. That's what Breda Pest Management is all about. Listen, in a day and age in which every college program needs as much support as it can get, when we have a chance to support somebody that supports UGA, I think that's probably a good thing to do. So in this case, for us, that's Breda Pest Management. I want you to give them a call or reach out to them online. Best way to do so is the website, BREDA, BredaPest.com. BREDA, BredaPest.com. Termite protection, bugs, critters, you know, these like squirrels get in your attic or who even knows what. I mean, it's that time of year where there's all kinds of, you know, creatures kind of roaming about. So keep them out of your house, keep the termites away, keep everything else away, and put more money back in your pocket when you make the switch. Breda Pest Management online, BredaPest.com. BREDA, BredaPest.com. In business since 1975. 100-plus employees stretched out all across our market area. I see the vehicles all over town all the time. I love the work they do. Glad to have them as a part of our show. Okay, before we hear from Mike Griffith in a little bit, and before we do Around the Doghouse in a moment, let me give you a reminder that yesterday we extended our first invitation to our 2025 Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge. I've been amazed by the response. I appreciate it. To be frank, what's even more amazing than that is is I believe as of this morning when I, as of about, let's say 7:30 this morning when I got in the car to kind of come here to work today, I believe I had emailed back everybody who had emailed me. And if you've ever emailed me before, you know what a miracle that is, including those probably who work with me. Like if the idea that I have been so responsive and am committed to being so responsive to these emails, I mean, that in itself is truly a miracle. But we've already had a huge response. I want to keep it going between now and when the games tip on Thursday. We'll give you all the way till, at least as close to tip time on Thursday as we can to get as many folks in here. And what we've told you is the winner of our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge will be invited to come onto the air and brag about how much they know about college basketball. That'll be fun. And for the very first time ever, last year we said, hey, we might try to do something for you. This year we're actually making a promise that for the first 200 people, beyond 200, I can't really make a lot of promises, but for the first 200 people, we're going to send you a very special token of our appreciation. We have a golden shoe sticker that we're going to send to you. And so for the first 200 people, we're going to do that. So I want to tell you how you can do this here. My email is easy to remember, brandon.adams@DawgNation.com. Brandon.adams@DawgNation.com. Can we show this on the screen, what we need from you, so we can send this to you? This is our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge. Obviously, send us your name, send us your mailing address, your phone number, and if you'll send that to brandon.adams@DawgNation.com. Everybody who did this yesterday, I've already reached back out and said thanks. I'll send you a link for the bracket, but also I need to have your information so I can send you something in the mail, at least for the first 200 people. And as of now, we still have some space left in that first 200. But go ahead and get it in so we can try to. And listen, if I can do more than 200, I will. I just can't make a promise beyond 200. So do that. Name, address, email, phone number to brandon.adams@DawgNation.com. I'll send you back a link. All the folks after the show, I'll do that today. Do it again later on this evening too. I'll send you a link. We'll get you in the bracket, and then kind of around that time, I'm also going to start sending some of these golden shoe stickers out to people. So appreciate you being a part of that. That is coming up, and that is great stuff. I'll give you another reminder before we wrap up today, but I'd love to have you be a part of our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge. Already a good number of people have. Okay, before Mike Griffith live from Wichita, Kansas, the site of the Dogs tomorrow, let's go around the doghouse here today, presented by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. We heard from 7 Georgia players yesterday, which is a remarkable number, really unprecedented to hear from that many players, as a part of a spring practice interview thing. And over the course of the next couple of days, we're going to share a lot of this with you. I thought perhaps maybe the most interesting guy we heard from yesterday was Jordan Hall. Now, I have both I believe there's a real need for Georgia to step up in a big way with the defensive line this season, but I also have a lot of optimism that really could happen. And some of the things that we hear from these Georgia defensive linemen just makes me feel that way even more. What Hall kind of held court with yesterday during his press conference, I just thought it was amazing. So entertaining, just so, meaningful from a football sense, but also just enjoyable to hear. And I want to just kind of rattle through some of this. No real big opinion or hot take on most of this. I just think it's valuable information, valuable insight into Jordan Hall's thought process here. Because Hall, when healthy, I think is one of the more intriguing prospects on this Georgia football roster, regardless of position. Not healthy a year ago, working his way much closer to full health here right now. And, very, very meaningful, very, very honest and introspective. Hall yesterday talked about the kind of mental fatigue and the challenge of trying to get back on a football field and just missing so much of the 2024 season. I just thought this was extraordinarily interesting from Jordan Hall yesterday with the media. Here he is on just what his process has been like the last year or so.
I'll probably say rehabbing the mental more than the physical has probably been the toughest part about everything. Physically, I can go in the training room. I've been there 3-4 times a day. But mentally, it still weighs on me. I'm not the same as I was before. I had a lot of high hopes going into last season and basically didn't play a lot all last year. So, it take a toll on you. But, as a leader now and as an older guy in my room, I got taken that into account. I just got to step up and shake that off a little bit, But it's hard. Everything's hard for being here, but You know, it comes with this. It's just hard. That's all it is. It's just hard.
I'm not the first one to make this point, but it's worth repeating. You know, football players play with a helmet on. The helmet comes with a face mask. We don't see their faces. We watch them on TV. We're in the stadium looking down. You know, oftentimes they feel very far away. It can be easy to forget these are human beings. Now, they are unusually large human beings, as you know, a lot of them are, but human beings still nonetheless. And when you have personal ambitions and those ambitions are taken away, at least for 1 year, through no fault of your own, just an injury, like that would weigh on you. I mean, you know, if my back hurts and I can't swing a golf club, I'm depressed. I mean, imagine if my whole livelihood was built around my, physical activity. You know, the way in which that would just sort of weigh on you. The fact that Jordan is willing to be as honest as he's willing to be right there, I think that's awesome. And if you weren't already rooting for him to break out in a big way this year, to remind people about what a strong prospect he still is, then words like that I think would make you feel that way even more. Jordan also wanted to talk about some of his teammates here a little bit. We've obviously hyped up Elijah Griffin using the words of others to help us do that. And listen, a lot of that's just in fun. We're really not trying to put more on somebody than they deserve, or put more on them that is too much expectation to live up to. We're not trying to be unfair. We just think it's kind of fun to hear nice things said about an incoming Georgia player. And Jordan Hall also gave us a little more information yesterday into why he thinks it is that people have been so impressed with Elijah Griffin, the former five-star, beginning his Georgia career as a defensive lineman. Like, what is all of that about? Hall provided us more information on that yesterday, too.
He remind me a lot of myself, work ethic-wise, but not when it comes to the weight room. I was not as strong as he was when I first got here. You could tell why he was a top 5 recruit in his class, and he still has a lot more work to do. But at the end of the day, he's going to be a good one. He's going to be a good one. You can tell he's a hard worker and a good work ethic, strong as I get out. You know what I'm saying? He's an ox. You know what I'm saying? So he's a good kid. You know what I'm saying? That takes you a long way.
Yeah, listen, I mean, you like the idea of a hard worker, physically strong. That kind of echoes the Warren Brinson stuff about seeing him in the weight room and being very impressed with him. Like, if a incoming five-star is going to get a lot of hype, that's kind of what you want the backbone of it to be. Boy, how hard he's working. You know, how much he's throwing weight around in the weight room. That's the sort of stuff that travels. That's the sort of stuff that translates. You know, that's the kind of stuff that if you're making a bet on, you'd want to bet on a big guy willing to get stronger and work hard. That sort of feels like that pans out on the football field more often than not. So I think that's really fun. Now, what's also funny is something else that Jordan Hall was talking about. Like, I'm a big believer, and I've said this a million times, that, give me the former elite recruit that's also been on campus for a year. Oftentimes those guys are among the more intriguing prospects for me for an upcoming season. One of those guys for Georgia is Joseph Jonah-Janye. Now, Jonah-Janye has also been dealing with his own form of injury. And yesterday, Jordan Hall, very funny in just kind of describing the mindset that Jonah-Janye is approaching his own recovery with, and what it might be like to see Joseph Jonah-Janye on the field for the Dogs here in 2025. More of a really just a magnetic personality from Jordan Hall.
Well, y'all probably don't know this about Joseph, but he probably might be one of the funniest guys on the team. So he has this thing about himself when it comes to his work ethic. He works hard as well. Like, I've never seen anybody bounce back from what he had, even with Smile and Ty having that same injury. He attacked it in a different way. Everybody goes through injuries here, and then everybody gets down on himself a little bit. But you rarely see Joseph down when it came to that. He has a thing where he said, because he's African, he puts that out there before everybody, and he says his genetics are more different than everybody else's on the team. So if you ever get a chance to interview him, he'll tell him himself. But he just said just like this, my genetics are just so more superior than everyone in here. So he'll say that. But he's a hard worker as well. He's a tough guy. And I feel like he's bouncing back from the injury the same way I feel like everybody else has.
I was not a high-level athlete growing up, but I did play sports. And I will tell you, there's nothing like the joking that goes on in the locker room, sort of, busting chops back and forth and the things being said there. And, that just sort of sounds like the kind of thing that happens in the locker room, just funny stuff. And, I think that Joseph Jonah-Janye is such an interesting player. You'd love to see him back to full health. You'd love to see the contribution he can make this year. And it sounds like Jordan Hall certainly sees that, too. I'll give you one more here real quick. A lot of young player talk there. How about a veteran presence? A guy like Christian Miller, who we've talked about a lot. His decision to come back has the potential of paying big dividends for Georgia. And yesterday, Jordan Hall also talked about what Miller means to him in particular. This is more great stuff from really an outstanding interview from Jordan Hall. Here is Jordan on Christian Miller.
That's my guy. Yeah, that's my guy. That's big, bro. I don't even tell him a lot, but I look up to him a lot. He's been through a lot of things that I have. Like when I first got here, it was me and him and John Jefferson. He's gone now to SMU, but that's my guy since I first got here. And I seen the transition he made and the leap he made last year. I don't know how much work we put in the offseason last season. So, this year is a big year for him, a big year for our defensive line. But he's a leader in our room, and he has some special things coming for this season.
Just great stuff. I mean, just outstanding from Jordan Hall. And listen, it gets me excited about a position group that I think does have some potential. If I could wave a magic wand on any one thing right now, there's obviously a lot of choices when it comes to this Georgia roster. But you get this defensive line kind of back directionally moving like it, has in the past. And I think the overall fortunes for the 2025 season could really be on the rise there too. And when you think about Joseph Jonah-Janye, Christian Miller, Elijah Griffin, even though he's young, certainly Jordan Hall, now that he's healthy, bring Xavier McLeod in this conversation. When you think about the bodies that are there, the potential exists for this defensive line to be very, very good here in 2025. And that is Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Now, listen, we love the great state of Georgia when it comes to football. Let's talk about defensive linemen. A lot of great defensive linemen homegrown right here in our state. When it comes to things grown here in Georgia, our folks at Georgia Farm Bureau understand all of that. For a long time, they've supported the farmers here in Georgia, and now that level of service they want to give to you. You've got insurance needs, car insurance, home insurance, perhaps life insurance, things like that. Our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau want to provide you that service, and when you connect with them, you're going to find out what we've known for a long time, that Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team, taking good care of you, friendly people, agents, claims adjusters, things like that. They want to provide a great level of service. When it comes to your insurance provider, you have to have insurance. You don't want to just choose anybody. You want to choose people who care about you, people who are like going to work and living life and doing things in communities just like yours all across Georgia. That's what Georgia Farm Bureau is. That is what they're all about. So give them a call. 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050 or online, gfbinsurance.com. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. All right. Mike Griffith is in Wichita, Kansas. Dogs getting ready for Gonzaga. We'll also talk a little football, too. I'm late getting to him, so let's get it rock and rolling here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will get to the basketball here in a moment. Georgia trying to pull an upset over perennial power Gonzaga. Let me do a little football with you, Mike, before we get there, and I appreciate your time and sorry for keeping you waiting. We just heard from Jordan Hall. I thought really a remarkably interesting interview from him, rattling off his thoughts about a handful of guys there. There'll never be a 2021 defensive line again. Jordan Carter was a backup. I should say Jalen Carter was a backup on that. There'll never be a college defensive line like that, probably ever again. But when I think about where Georgia does have a chance to provide a value add this season, where it could be improved, I do view defensive line as a real possibility for that. I think that Hall is still a really important prospect. I think that Griffin, despite being young, could come in and play. I think Joseph Jonah-Janye, year 2, for a guy working his way back to health, that could be interesting. You hear a little bit of, quiet buzz about Xavier McLeod. There are other guys you can mention in that too. Christian Miller, of course. I do think this defensive line this year has a chance to take a step forward, and I think the entire fortunes for the team could be changed for the better if that's indeed the case. What do you think?
I'd agree. I mean, you said it all. I'm actually writing about Jordan Hall now. I thought the same thing, and it was kind of a shock to all us in Wichita. You hear, wow, Kirby Smart made 7 guys available at one availability, and as people know, usually maybe 2, maybe 4. But Kirby had a lot to clear off his chest. As far as Jordan Hall, look, this is a guy that was the number 2 defensive lineman in the country, the number 12 player overall. This is a guy that you expected to make an immediate impact. And I thought you said it really well earlier in the show, Brandon, when you said, look, this is through no fault of his own. It's really unfortunate when a kid has, a pair of stress fractures in his legs. He'd never been hurt before. And, with the personality, the dynamic personality that he has, this is a guy you want on the field. You can tell this is an infectious player that's going to make those around him better and bring a different level of energy and some star power that, quite frankly, was missing. Stackhouse and Brinson, both of these guys were productive. I know, we all like these guys, but they were a significant drop off from the level of play that Jalen Carter brought, from Jordan Davis brought, from Devontae Wyatt. These were not first-round picks. And Georgia suffered across the board because the defensive line was not as good as it's been. I mean, there weren't as many 3-and-outs. The field position wasn't as good for the offense. Teams were able to run the ball and find balance and score more points. So the offense wasn't operating from the position of power, the field position, the number of positions, the field position, the number of possessions. It all affects everything. And it started with the major drop-off on the defensive line. And you mentioned those names, McLeod and Miller and Joseph Jonah Ajayi and maybe Jordan Big Baby Hall. If Georgia can take a step back in the right direction, become a top 10 run defense once again, dominate in the trenches, that's going to go a long way for the entire team. It makes the secondary better because they're not coverage as long. It makes the linebackers better because it's harder for the offensive line to get to them. It makes the offense better because they're back on the field. I mean, my goodness, Stetson Bennett would be off the field for, 3-and-out, 3-and-out, 3-and-out. And Stetson's right back out there, and he would pick it up. And the supporting cast that he had, it all goes together when Kirby talks about that. And so I think this is probably the most important area of the football team that Georgia needs to step in the right direction. And Jordan Big Baby Hall, could be central to that. I heard him say it was 80%. Hopefully he gets a little closer to that by the fall. You want to see that kid out on the field. And to your point, a great personality. And just personally, you want to see someone with that passion have the opportunity to play the game.
And let me make one more point about this. This is a little bit abstract, but, Daniel Jeremiah, some of these NFL draft experts, Jeremiah in particular, has said that he's got more first-round grades on defense linemen this year than far more than a year ago and more than a typical year. And, this is one of those things that from a sort of a talent standpoint does fluctuate year to year. The point I'm getting to is this, is that a year ago, okay, you might say that, well, the Georgia defensive line wasn't quite at the same elite level that it had been maybe in previous years, but also in comparison to the rest of the sport, there was a greater level of defensive line depth at the high end than we sometimes see. That means last year around college football, there might be more teams with more, basically more higher quality defensive lines than sometimes we typically see in college football. If the talent level of that position group, a position group that fluctuates, if it returns to more of a normal level here in 2025, the fact that Georgia, through its talent acquisition process, still has the potential to sort of hoard some talent at that position, we could also see, I think, the Georgia defensive line kind of take a step up in comparison to what might be a more stabilized and normal talent level for defensive line around college football. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, and part of it's, Jordan, coming off of this injury. I think that's big, but gosh, Brandon, I don't want to bury the lead out of yesterday. I mean, if these guys don't work like they need to work, it's not going to matter. I don't know about you, but I was really taken aback by some of the word choice of Kirby Smart, and you and I know we've done this long enough. Kirby doesn't say things just to say things. That wasn't just a matter of, oh, he's having a bad day. Kirby is genuinely concerned with the work ethic at Georgia and the way these guys are taking to coaching. I don't know how deep you read into him saying that all the freshmen are out of shape, but he's talking about somebody not doing their job. Somebody didn't do their job for the Georgia freshmen for him to throw the blanket over it and say all the freshmen are out of shape. I've never heard Kirby with that sort of an indictment on one entire group. That's a lot of players. He said all of them. I mean, he said it. I'm like, what is going on? And, players being offended by coaching, and here's the thing. You say this the third or the fourth practice of spring. Kirby Smart's done this before. This is year 10 at Georgia. And what do you have, 9 years at Alabama, I think? He knows what it's supposed to look like. And the thing that you and I have heard so many times over the years is the standard is the standard. And Kirby saying this Georgia football team collectively, not individually, but collectively, is not meeting the standard. This ain't it. we've got these questions of what's Georgia going to do this year, and is Gunnar Stockton good enough to put the team on his shoulders, and how big of a step can the D-line take, and what's going to happen in the secondary, with two leaders gone, and what's happening with the receiver. He says the receivers, they're out of shape. They got their hands on their hips. He said they're trying, they're talented, but they're out of shape. They can't do the full set of reps. You talk about the defenses, they're all kind of swimming. Nobody's standing out. This is not what we want to hear. The fact that Kirby has chosen to say these things publicly, I think is very significant, because he's not just telling us, in the media that, or the fans that. He's sending a message to the team. And he also said the standard's not going down, and if they don't meet it, they're not going to be here. I mean, he put some cats on notice, Brandon, that Georgia football is not going to sink. It is not going to stay below the standard. Things had better change rapidly, or this second portal window could be very interesting, because you see, we'll get some guys that would. I thought it was one of the more powerful Kirby Smart press conferences, one of the more significant. And the fact that he made 7 players available, again, he didn't do that as a favor to anybody or because half the media is out in Wichita covering basketball. He did that because he wants the hard workers on this team to be the ones speaking out and talking about what needs to happen, to double down on that messaging. So to me, that was a very significant press conference last night. I think the messaging was not coincidental or accidental at all. I think Kirby Smart's telling us Georgia is not where it needs to be, and he's going to get it where it needs to be, and he wants these players to hear that message.
Certainly an interesting thought. You are in Wichita, Kansas, where Georgia takes on Gonzaga tomorrow afternoon, and been sort of saying the same thing all week. Gonzaga is a much prettier team than Georgia is. They're 80% from the free throw line. They're top 5 offensive efficiency. They're, power rated essentially as a top 10 team. And yet they're almost always power rated near the top in college basketball. And while they have made 9 straight Sweet 16s, oftentimes a Sweet 16 appearance is actually below projection for where they would have been in that given year, because sometimes the sort of sports talky point ends up being true, that the West Coast Conference has not always properly prepared Gonzaga for March Madness, even though you got a St. Mary's and you probably got a San Francisco. You don't have terrible teams necessarily, but it's not the big physicality the SEC can provide. So my point in this, and I've said this now a couple of times, is there is a chance that Gonzaga makes it look easy against Georgia. The numbers would suggest they might. There's also a chance that Georgia is just, especially with the front court guys, just so much bigger and stronger and battle-tested that Georgia could win this game. I mean, Gonzaga's a pretty big favorite for an 8-9, but, compared to normal. But I am still of the belief that Georgia, because of who it's beaten and the size that it possesses, the fact that it's kind of been in some sort of street fighty type games this year, I do think that Georgia could win. What's your kind of early handicap here, one day out, for the Dogs' return to March Madness?
Well, again, you just said it all. You said it all. They don't play in a conference that's as good. They're not as battle-tested as Georgia. They average, I think, 43.1 points in the paint. I think that leads the nation. You mentioned Gonzaga with 9 straight Sweet 16 appearances under Mark Few. He's the 6th winningest active head coach. They've been to 26 straight NCAA tournaments. That's second only to Michigan State's 27. They've been here before. I think you said they were the prettier team. I would agree. They've got a couple more high-profile guys, and still, I think this is a good matchup for Georgia because Georgia's, as you said, has played a really good schedule in the SEC. Georgia's particularly good at the 2-point field goal percentage defense. They've been somewhat susceptible to the hot shooting teams from the perimeter. You can't do it all. You can't, and you know this as well, Brandon. You can't extend your defense. You leave yourself somewhat susceptible in the paint. Georgia likes to kind of pack it in and block those lanes, prevent those drives to the basket and those 2s and 1s. And so when you do that, you got to give a little something up. The good news is, and we'll see what happens this game, but Gonzaga was only 1 of 15 shooting the 3 in the West Coast Conference Championship game against St. Mary's last Tuesday. So, this is a Gonzaga team that hasn't shot the 3 particularly well. They haven't been as consistent as they've been. And yet here they are with the same opportunity as everyone else. The tournament experience, like Mark Few said, is very important. But what really matters is those 40 minutes. And I'd say the same thing for Georgia. As well as they played in beating teams like Florida, like St. John's, like Kentucky, how do they perform in those 40 minutes here out in Wichita, Kansas. So I thought you did a great breakdown. I think you covered all the bases as far as the matchup and why Georgia has a chance because of the level of competition. You mentioned the spread. I think it's down to 5.5. Last time I saw it, opened at 7. I think Georgia's a sneaky upset pick. I think if we look at what this win would mean, the fact that Georgia's made the NCAA tournament for the first time in 10 years is obviously big. But if you can get Gonzaga's head on the wall, that's a marquee win. I don't care what year it is. Mark Few and Gonzaga run an outstanding program. They're not an easy out. You mentioned the 9 straight Sweet 16 appearances. That's the longest active streak in college basketball right now. So this would be a significant win, and it would give Georgia that that headline poster moment. Maybe they jump out a little bit. You're watching the highlights and they go, "Hey, Georgia basketball, look what they did." And that's what Georgia needs, because as good as this season has been, I don't even feel like it's resonated enough with the fringe Georgia fans. In Athens, they're all over it. Atlanta Talk Radio, I don't know what Mediterranean restaurant they're talking about, but they're not talking enough about what Mike White did. And he needs this signature win, in my opinion, to move the needle even more than he already has.
Yeah, I mean, in just plain language, Georgia hasn't won a tournament game in 20-plus years, and I guess that game was sort of given back to the NCAA. I mean, anything that hasn't happened in 20-plus years would be a big deal. And, I'm all about it. I'm very, very excited. I can't promise you that Georgia will win because I think there's a lot of scenarios in which they might not. But, sure. I mean, boy, what a big deal. And I think that, by the way, Houston in round 2 is very good, so I'm not even willing to go there. But just to think that you could get to the first weekend, that you could win a tournament game, something you have not done in more than 2 decades, I just think it'd be gigantic, Mike. We appreciate your coverage. We'll look forward to reading you from Wichita there at DawgNation.com and back here on our program again, DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management, very soon as well.
Thanks, Brandon. Can I get in the Golden Shoe Challenge? Am I eligible?
I'd love to. I'll send you a link. We'd love to have you in there.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks, Brandon.
All right, good stuff, Mike. Thanks a lot.
All right, see you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So I was thinking about this, and we'll try to make this kind of quick, but so Mike talks about our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge. If you are in fact, I can't wait to go dive into some of our submissions, because the cool thing about the technology now is, as opposed to like when I was a kid and we were first getting into bracket stuff, even in like early days of adulthood, the bracket that you turned in was on a sheet of paper. And it's like you're writing it in pen, you can't read anybody's handwriting, and you're scribbling through stuff. Like, I mean, I am old enough, to remember back when the bracket contest was a manila folder full of like 8.5 by 11 sheets printed off with people writing this stuff in by hand. And I mean, who knows, how accurate some of that stuff ended up being when everything is sort of, based on whoever is running the pool for wherever you happen to be, how accurate they were at kind of tabulating all this kind of stuff. But now this is all done digitally. And I do think the digital part of this makes it more interesting. In fact, for our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge, this is a point that I think a lot of you probably understand, but it's worth kind of reiterating here. A big question that a lot of you are going to have is, what matters to you more? Is it your support for Georgia? Because I'm guessing in our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge, I'm guessing that most of the people will have Georgia advancing past Gonzaga. Whether they really think it or not, it's just sort of fun to pick Georgia. Beyond that, who knows? But if you are in a competitive bracket where, like, either A, you just want the ego and the bragging right points, or if that's, for maybe a more tangible prize, how serious are you willing to do it? Because if you're in like a situation like this where it's a lot of Georgia fans doing a bracket together, that's a lot of Georgia picks. If you want an easy point, potentially in comparison, then you go contrarian there, because if you're wrong, you only lose 1 point. But if you're right, you get a point that nobody else gets. Does that make sense? It's one of those things where you got to think that way bracket-wise. In other words, if it's you and 8 buddies that are in a bracket together, you probably shouldn't pick a lot of upsets. This is sort of just bracket 101, that in a small number of brackets, when you're trying to win for, pizza money or something like that, you got to probably pick chalk, because over the course of the bracket, chalk, the better teams are just going to win more often than not. There will be some upsets, but as you kind of get deeper into the tournament, those upsets sort of whittle down, that the best way to win a small bracket pool is with the safest possible picks. But the more the bracket becomes large, and ours may be 200 plus. Some of y'all, I mean, there are some brackets that have like 1,000 entries. I'm talking about even like neighborhoods and things like that. Under the cover of darkness, there are some of these bracket pools that get really, really big. If you are in a really, really big bracket, you are not winning that bracket picking 1 seeds and 2 seeds all the way through. Even you're not likely to win a bracket that has high 3-figure into 1,000 type people. You're just not likely to win the bracket anyway. But your only chance to win a large bracket pool is through contrarian picks. They are not likely to be correct, but if you just match the same picks that everybody else gets, that's not going to win you the bracket. It's kind of the same sort of basic concept of like daily fantasy or something like that. So if you want to go to like one of these major national sports websites, they will give you the most frequent picks. Here's who's been picked. Here are the most likely picks. And kind of playing against some of that, if you're trying to win a large bracket pool, some of that's probably a pretty good idea to do. I'll also say this quickly. Actually, let's go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean prior to that. So around our house, there is a lot of chatter, and cannot confirm this right now, but it could be that the Adams family is ready to take a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. And I'm as shocked as anybody because we recently moved. We got kids doing 1,000 things. But my wife came to me the other day. She's like, I got to take a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. I'm hearing you talk about this every day. They don't get to go on our DawgNation cruise because, that's happening at a time when they're in school and things like that. But she was like, I got to take a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. So the chatter is ongoing. It may be happening. We may be back on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. And for my kids, this means perfect day Coco Cay for them. Now, this is one of those things where the parents are probably more into like the chill side of the island, the Oasis Lagoon. If it's just the two of us together, it's Hideaway Beach, around the beachy area. Kids, though, they love the Thrill Water Park. They love the tallest water slide in North America. They love all the fun stuff that comes with that. And on Utopia of the Seas, which is the ship we're going to be on for our DawgNation cruise, there's so many like water activities. There's 3 water slides on the ship. There's the trip to Perfect Day Coco Cay and all the water slides there. There's the largest wave pool in the Bahamas. There's all kinds of ways to sort of splash around and get soaked if that's what you'd like to do. Our friends at Royal Caribbean are great at that, and our good friend Jessica Slater, because if our family is booking a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, Jessica Slater is the one that we're going to book it with because she just knows the whole thing. And, she just answers your questions, give you information. Even for somebody like me that's been on a lot of Royal Caribbean cruise vacations, I still sort of rely on Jessica's special expertise for all of this. So give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She'll get you everything you need for a great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation here in 2025. So what I was going to say is about the bracket. So right now ongoing, we have the so-called first 4. Now, most bracket folks understand this. For our DawgNation Golden Shoe Bracket Contest, and for pretty much any bracket contest you're in, unless you're doing a survivor pool, and that's different. But almost any bracket contest you're going to be in, the first 4 doesn't really count. You can advance the winner of the first 4 in your bracket, but almost no bracket is counting those first 4 games. Like last night, the most controversial teams that was included in the field, North Carolina won easily. You can advance North Carolina past Ole Miss if you want to, but most brackets, including our DawgNation Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge, does not count first 4 games in the bracket because that's sort of beyond the field of 64. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people really don't like the talks of like expanding the bracket. Like right now, I mean, as I said before, when I first started filling out brackets, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. The 64 teams fit perfectly on there. The 4 quadrants, the 4 regions, you know what it looks like. It's just, there is a symmetry to that that's just so appealing and so comforting. When you go first 4, well, now it's a little bit messy, and so people sort of pretend those don't happen. It's sort of banished to true TV. But if they expand the bracket, like beyond the field of 64, once again, we are picking at a thread of like an American institution. And here's the tricky thing when it comes to all of this stuff, whether it be college basketball, college football, whatever else. Like the sheer popularity of these things, there is no one who knows exactly why they are as popular as they are. It is a complex system. And, complex systems are always a little hard to sort of know, like, what matters and doesn't matter. But, not easy to replicate the success of something that has as much, like, cultural currency as March Madness does. So the point is, there's a lot of talk about expanding it. I think that's always a dangerous proposition. First four going on right now. By the way, it's Texas tonight, by the way. So if you want more of the first four action tonight, you got Texas and Xavier. That's actually probably a pretty good game. And then you got American and Mount St. Mary's, the other first four game tonight. But Texas Xavier, not a bad game. A lot of love for Xavier in that spot. So we'll keep our eye on that. I'll also mention this very quickly. Getting to football, I thought Brandon Marcello, CBS Sports, had an interesting story up there looking at what he thought were the 5 SEC teams that could win the national championship here this season. Now, Georgia's obviously on there. We'll kind of move past the Georgia part of this. We may come back to that, at a certain point later on this week. Let me give you the other 4 teams, sort of a brief thought on this. He mentions Alabama. Now, in any given year in college football, even in the Kalen DeBoer era, you would assume this is true. But I do think that even in Tuscaloosa itself, I do think there is as much skepticism about Alabama right now as has existed, because this is unlike, my gosh, you got to go back a long time to find Alabama being this much of an unknown at quarterback. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to end up being a bad quarterback because, honestly, Kalen DeBoer is a pretty good offensive mind himself. Ryan Grubb coming in helps bolster that offensive coaching staff. If you're making a bet, you'd probably bet on Alabama having a pretty good quarterback no matter who it ends up being. But we're coming off of Bryce Young, Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, where quarterback, Alabama has been as quarterback-driven, any team in America, for quite some time. And now we're not really quite so sure. Is it Austin Mack? Is it the incoming freshman? We don't really know that. Ty Simpson, I guess, is still there. And so because of an Alabama team, lost 3 times a year ago, really didn't come all that close to making the college football playoff when it was all said and done. I think that even in Tuscaloosa right now, there's a little bit of skepticism. It's one of the reasons why that Georgia-Bama game in September is going to be so big. Georgia does, I think at this point in its life cycle, desperately need to win against Alabama. But for Alabama, they got pressure too. DeBoer is trying to show his own fans and his own boosters in this NIL age that he is still the kind of coach that can kind of keep Alabama where it has been now, for every year since, 08, 09 as a major part of the national championship picture. Marcelo also mentions LSU. LSU is interesting. Garrett Nussmeier coming back is a big deal. Working to improve the defensive depth, probably a little bit of a favorable schedule. And in all the talk about sort of the next coach win a national championship, we've said before that Brian Kelly's image has been tarnished a little bit because of the fact that Notre Dame has done well without him, because of the fact that Jaden Daniels has gone on NFL success, only further sort of, signal boosting the point of, should Kelly have done more with Daniels while he was the LSU quarterback? Like right now, the Brian Kelly star has fallen a little bit, but we're also contrarian around here. When people are sort of looking one direction, we have a tendency to look the other. The Kelly's probably still a good coach, even though he's had some problems and he's probably a little bit of a personality clash for some people in LSU. It does seem like LSU right now is a little bit quiet here for the moment. And the other, Marcelo also mentions Texas and Ole Miss. I'll say the Texas part of that. We talk about them enough. Ole Miss is another team that's really, really interesting to me. Last year, you can make a case. If Ole Miss had made the playoff, they would have been one of the more dangerous teams in it. They were really good. Listen, Georgia fans have to acknowledge that because they went, we all went up to Oxford in November, and it was not a pleasant day. This was a very good Ole Miss team, but they still lost 3 times. And now Jackson Dart, who's climbing up draft boards, is no longer there. Walter Nolan, guys like that, no longer there. And I think what you're about to see, for those who care about these sort of projections, I think you're about to see a really interesting contrast in terms of how Ole Miss is perceived. Their over-under, like win total and some of that kind of stuff, is going to be pretty high. But it's not a given to me this is a preseason top 25 team. That you're going to see, even when in the midst of some of these like way too early top 25s or gambling projections compared to human polls and things of that nature, you're just going to see a pretty sharp contrast of like who thinks Ole Miss is still really good and who thinks Ole Miss and the 3 losses they got last year, much like we said about Alabama, is a little bit of a sign that, hey, maybe they just sort of missed their moment. And I think it's a fascinating team. It's also relevant because it's on Georgia's schedule, the Rebels are this year. But one of those teams that Marcelo seems to say, some good things about, but I don't know that's universally agreed upon with the rest of the college football world here right now. And we'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Okay, on a Wednesday, normally this is the spot on the show in which we'd have Davin Bellamy. And we expect to have Davin back on the show again in the very near future. But Davin's not with us today, and he's not with us for a very good reason. I'm very happy about this. If you're watching on video, I want to show you this on the screen. So the DC Defenders in the UFL, and I got a little bit of a sort of a crash course in spring football from our guy Jack Leo before the show began today. UFL, a combination of the old XFL, I guess XFL 2.0, and the USFL, ironically enough, USFL 2.0. They have now combined to be the UFL. Many of y'all probably know this. I didn't know this at all. DC Defenders in that league. Davin Bellamy has really been kind of a star in spring football in these various leagues. He is now re-signed with the DC Defenders. And what a guy named James Larson, who covers this stuff, wrote is he's been one of spring football's top defensive ends, earning all USFL honors and all XFL honors, meaning in previous seasons, over the course of his career. So Davin, it really made it – we didn't talk about this much with him on the air, but I know just personally he'd really made it a big, strong intention of his to be back playing somewhere again in 2025. And that goal has come true for him, back with the UFL. He's worked really hard to stay in shape and obviously be able to be a contributing player, and now it's worked out. I'm so happy for him. It's such great news. Obviously, we believe the DC Defenders are getting a good one with Davin Bellamy's return there, and it's just sort of fun watching one of our own getting a chance to further his football career. So great news for Davin Bellamy. We expect to have him back here soon. He said that even with his football schedule, much like Jake Fromm has done and others have done on our show, he's going to try to still make it a point to be on the show each week. We'll just have to work out some sort of schedule to be able to do that. But for now, just happy to report really good news. Davin Bellamy back in professional football again with the DC Defenders there. So that's all awesome news. Let me also give a shout-out to Dr. Pepper before we get ready to go here today. Y'all know I love it, the rich, one-of-a-kind flavor, and I'm getting ready for this Thursday, Friday, and for many weeks after that as March Madness rolls on to be enjoying plenty of basketball. And as I'm sort of sitting around the house watching that, you better believe the ice-cold can that I enjoy, Dr. Pepper, won't be too far from my reach. So enjoy some as you're shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you're picking up your groceries. Pick up some Dr. Pepper. In fact, pick up the brand-new flavor, the Dr. Pepper Blackberry. Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. Fun new offering from Dr. Pepper to go along with the classics, which we've enjoyed for a long time. It's a Pepper thing. We're glad to have Dr. Pepper as a part of DawgNation Daily. So one more time, in lieu of a golden shoe here today, and as the show is rolling on, I'm seeing these coming in. More bracket submissions for our golden shoe bracket challenge. Love all of that. I'll put it on the screen one more time to give you a reminder. Simply email me. The address is brandon.adams@dawgnation.com. Give me your name, give me your address, your email, your phone number. For the first 200 people that sign up, we're going to send you a little token of our golden shoe appreciation, a fun golden shoe sticker that we've had made up now for more than a year and just now getting them sent out. But we'll do that for you. We'll also kind of set it up just in good fun. We'll see who is the winner of our DawgNation bracket contest here. And, of course, that winner will get a chance to come on the show, and we'll laud them for their basketball knowledge. So one more time, your name, mailing address, email, phone number to brandon.adams@dawgnation.com. Big tourney starts tomorrow, so get it in there so we'll be ready to go on that. Lousy, stinking Gators, we're rooting against them in basketball, and we love their failure in football. How about 1,593 days? That's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. That's our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We'll look forward to talking to them. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews is one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. We're going to be somewhat short with comments today because, speaking of Jake Fromm, Jake is going to be on the show tomorrow, but we've got to pre-record that today here in a little bit. So we're going to go kind of quick with the comments to sort of jump in there and get a chance to record with Jake. So let me get a few, and we'll see what's going on here. DT on the subject of Lane Kiffin, the fact that kind of settled in as sort of an 8 or 9 win coach. Maybe that's the case. Last year, at least on paper, was the year that was supposed to change. That sort of feels like the big moment to step up and kind of become something different as a coach than what he had been. And I think that at least for then, he kind of missed that moment. And what's funny is if you look at the sort of transfer portal rankings for this year, Ole Miss still ranks very high, like the top 2 or 3 for what it brought in. But in my mind, I don't see like the Walter Nolan kind of game-changing type players like we've seen them have before, but perhaps I'm wrong. Eugene Marine says LSU's defense is loaded. He says that's the team that scares me the most. Yeah, I mean, I think that you will see a little bit of love for LSU as the season gets a little closer. Marine also cheering for Xavier. Yeah, I mean, I got no problem telling you I'll be openly rooting against Texas here tonight. The Minutemen of, not Minutemen, the UMass, the Minutemen. What is Xavier's mascot? But I'll be openly rooting for Xavier today. Let's see what else. Matt Rukavina says it's windy in Texas right now. Yeah, I mean, we've had actually very pleasant weather. I like this time. I like this time of year where it's a little cool in the morning, a little cool back again at night, but really nice during the day. This is one of the great weather stretches we've had in quite some time. Great weather stretch for us. Let's see what else. Bill Camacho checking in. You love to see him. Garrison Tugger likes Deion Sanders taking the spring games. Yeah, I do too. I mean, listen. I mean, college football is an incredibly popular sport. We obviously know that here in America. And the fact that more is not being done to just sort of leverage that interest in the non-fall time of the year, I just think it's really strange. I do. And so for some of the spring game fiasco stuff we see going on right now, as I told you yesterday, I actually blame the TV partners for some of that. I think they could do a lot more than they're doing. Let's get a couple more comments. Let me go to Facebook here for a moment. Yeah, Brian Whitaker, Jacob O'Neill, and Philip Jordan Wells. See, I learned this. I do well to keep up with what I can. There's plenty of sports that I just go straight over my head. I am certainly aware of the spring football leagues, and now that Davin's back in it, I'll obviously be watching much more closely. But I did not know that the USFL and the XFL had united to become the UFL. I have a hard time keeping up with some of that. Ken Holcomb says, "Go Dog, beat the Zags." Love that. Let's see what else. Alan Verbanchik predicts that Mike White will turn Georgia into NCAA tournament champion soon, so that's exciting. Lots of congratulations rolling in for Davin Bellamy. I'd love to see that. Philip Jordan Wells says, well, there goes that guest segment. It's kind of funny. It's like a lot of our regulars have gotten jobs. Like right after we sort of started doing weekly stuff with Jake Fromm, boom, he got picked up last year by the Washington Commanders, obviously continuing now with the Detroit Lions. Terrence Edwards, longtime guest of ours, became a head coach. Davin Bellamy, we're about a year, not quite a year, but, pushing towards a year of Davin's involvement with us. And all of a sudden he's back playing football too. We're like what's the movie, the rom-com? It's like you come on the show before you know it, you got employment. So you love to see that. Not that these guys didn't have employment prior to that, but you know what I'm saying. Let me pop over to YouTube for a second. Well, let us see what else. What's going on over here on YouTube for a second? I did notice there was a little shrapnel for a local media member, which I thought was a little interesting. A little interesting. Richie Bales and the subject of the players being I put some into that, but it does feel like we do this every year. Oh my gosh, these players, and listen, there is a huge wall. There is a huge wall. Some of the best players that Georgia has brought in have said, boy, we hit a real wall very early on of more being demanded of us than we thought we were capable of giving. There are a lot of players. I'm talking about some of the best guys that Georgia has had in this era have openly admitted to the fact that there were moments where they thought about quitting. Maybe football's not for me. Maybe I'll go, work a desk job or something. Some of these guys have said that. So that's all just sort of part of this. I really, I play the audio because I think it's kind of fun, but I also think there's a little bit of a manufactured drama here, and I'm not necessarily against it. And I do believe, providing good coaching to talented players is an important part of football. I really do, especially at the college game. But some of this does sort of feel like manufactured drama to me. But at the same time, it's kind of fun. Let's see what else. Let's see what else is going on. Donnie Wilkerson says he likes Kirby having that fire again, so there you go. Foster Moss says, if Georgia loses to Ty Simpson or a freshman quarterback, I want to put my hands up with Kirby and Bama. Yeah, look, go ahead and just get ready for it. That's going to be a nervy week. I'm just telling you right now. That's going to be a nervy week. And for Georgia, you will have been to Tennessee prior to that. So actually, maybe that takes some of the pressure off, maybe. If we got that schedule, can we slap that schedule up on the screen just for a second? Maybe this takes some of the pressure off. Hopefully it does anyway. Because if Georgia goes to Tennessee and wins, then the vibes for 2 weeks, because what you have is you got Tennessee on September 13th, and then you're off because it's another one of those weird years with 2 off weeks. And then you play Alabama on September 27th. So if you win at Tennessee, then you got 2 weeks of feeling pretty good about yourself with Alabama coming in. And instead of being like a pressure-packed thing of got to get over the hump against Alabama, instead of being that, it's more going to be sort of a feeling of kind of riding high and excited about a great atmosphere. And finally, Alabama, for the first time in the Kirby Smart era, is coming to Athens. As long as Georgia handles business, the vibe prior to the Alabama game has a chance to be pretty good. But, heaven forbid, and Georgia has dominated Tennessee in the Josh Heupel era. But Georgia also had its issues with road games a year ago. If we're being honest, you got to be honest about that. If something goes wrong for the Tennessee game, that Alabama game is going to be pressure-packed. Pressure-packed. We've said before, if you told me that Georgia could be undefeated at the end of September, I'm saying that almost any end-of-season goal all of a sudden seems much more achievable on the basis of just those 4 games alone. But, man, if you're trying – I don't even want to say it out loud. But if you're trying to avoid loss 2 against a team that's been a real nemesis for you with the entire October stretch still to come, yikes. So it's going to get very, very big very, very early. It's just going to be huge. It's just going to be huge. Tennessee wants to create a big atmosphere. That is a team that Georgia has handled, but it was said before, road games last year were tricky. And Alabama's just massive for the very reasons that Foster mentioned of I think one of the things, even in an otherwise mostly successful year for Georgia, a year that actually gave me some really positive memories, but the thing that sort of sticks in your crotch a little bit is the Alabama team that beat Georgia a year ago was not really a special team. It just wasn't. It was not a special bunch. Ryan Williams is a very good player. Jalen Milroe didn't really play against anybody as well as he played against Georgia, just being honest. That one kind of stings you a little bit because you made Alabama that particular day look more special than they turned out to be. Boy, it's going to be pressure-packed. Oh, my gosh. Just get ready for that whole that 3-week stretch. 2 games over the course of 3 weeks. Tennessee by Alabama. Boy, that's going to be big. Derek Lewis says he's never done a basketball bracket before, but it's going to be fun participating in some extracurricular events with his DawgNation Daily family. Derek, I appreciate that, A, for being a part of the bracket, but also I think brackets are really fun, especially when you just sort of do it for fun. So I think you may actually get in here and kind of like it. Just give you something to sort of watch and pay attention to. You may enjoy that. All right, we're going to do a couple more, then we've got to go. Jacob O'Neill reminds us that Ryan Williams was only 17 last year. Appreciate that reminder. Jacob also mentions that Austin Peay is going to be tough during the coin flip. What we've said about those 2 first games, Marshall and Austin Peay, especially the Marshall game because they're at least group of 5, is those are games in which if Georgia doesn't get off to a fast start in those games, because keep in mind, go back and look at the box scores from the 2023 games, the Ball States and those teams that Georgia was playing. I'm not trying to stir the pot, but Georgia got off to slow starts in those games too. Man, so, the whole month of September is just going to be pins and needles. It's just, I'm girding my loins for it right now as it is. It's just going to be pins and needles because there's going to be sort of weirdly more pressure on Georgia than the typical Marshall Austin Peay would sort of suggest. There's just going to be a little more of that because people are going to want to see Georgia get off to a faster start offensively. And they're going to want to see, Georgia sort of look the part. 2 pretty significant games looming at the back end of the month. You need 2 tune-ups at the beginning of the month. So even Austin Peay and Marshall are going to have a little more juice to them than the typical games like that might have. Matt Pritchett asked about where Georgia is with Jared Curtis. I would say most important point to understand to begin with is sounds like this might not go very long. We may hear news on this sooner rather than later. Alan Verbanchik predicts that Curtis will choose the Dogs. I believe there's a chance he might. I don't know that I would favor Georgia, but I don't know that I would favor Oregon necessarily either. We would believe that Oregon might have more of a financial compensation in line. We certainly know that Athens is a good bit closer to Curtis's home there in the Nashville area. Curtis seems to like the Georgia coaching staff. Obviously, Montgomery Van Gorder is leaving, so that was one of the guys that he knew, but he seems to be pretty close with Mike Bobo. Georgia once held the commitment. We don't see a lot of quarterbacks recommit, I don't reckon. So maybe that's writing on the wall. But, I'm not trying to be mealy-mouthed, but I don't really have much more of, 50-50-ish proposition with maybe a slight lean towards Oregon. I don't have much more to offer on that. I do believe that Georgia thinks it has a real chance. I don't think that Georgia would be going down the road as far as it's gone if it didn't think it had some real chance. They're also obviously entertaining other quarterbacks too. But they've gone down the road with Curtis here a little bit. I believe they think they have a chance. I believe their payment plan gives them some reason to sort of be in this. And they also feel like they have things to offer in addition to compensation. Brian Whitaker checking out. Brian, we appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for that. Last comments over here. Savannah Bryant's, I think we talked about this the other day. He's predicting the Braves lose 100 games. I really don't see that. I really don't see that. They may not win 90. I don't think they're losing 100. I really don't. And plus, you saw Strider this week at spring training. That's got to make you feel a little better about that, right? Remember, the Phillies, on paper, best team in the division, probably second best team in the National League. That is not a young bunch. The team you may have to worry about is New York, as much as it pains me to admit. By the way, I saw this thing the other day. You talk about a nightmare. Vehicle with Mets and Florida, the orange and blues, Mets and Florida. You want to talk about somebody that I would not drive cross country with. a Met/Florida fan, what a disaster that would be. What a disaster that would be. Savannah Bryan asking, this is an interesting question. When's the last time that Georgia lost 2 games in a row? I guess it would have been 2018, right? SEC championship and Sugar Bowl. That's the last time they lost 2 in a row, correct? And one of only 2 times they've lost 2 straight in the Smart era, right? I believe that Georgia lost 3 straight in 2016, lost 2 straight in 2018. Have they lost 2 straight in any other times than that? Not 17. Not 19, I don't think. 2020 season's hard to remember, but I don't think so. And then after that, they stopped losing, period. So I think they've only lost back-to-back games in 2 instances in the Smart era, 3 straight in 2016, and then SEC championship and bowl game in 2018. Am I forgetting something huge there? Man, Savannah Bryan is down on the Braves. Brian, A, I hope you're wrong, but B, I think you probably are. Now, listen, not my pick to win the division, not my pick to exceed 90 wins, I don't think. But I think they're better than that, Brian. But you've been consistent. You are not high on the Braves this year, and you may end up being right. But I don't think so. Philip Jordan Wells says, what about 2020? They didn't lose back-to-back in 20, though, did they? I don't think, anyway. Because the Florida and Bama would not have been back-to-back, would they have been? Man, what an awful year that was. Just in so many different ways. So many ways. All right, we're going to go for now. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online. R.S. Andrews. Matt Pritchett also asking about Tyler Atkinson. I mean, here's the thing. As Georgia's made Atkinson a huge priority, but there's also going to be major bidders for him. So it's definitely a player that you want. I don't know how many. I mean, I certainly couldn't say, oh, yeah, Georgia's definitely winning with Atkinson. I couldn't necessarily say that, although I do think that, Georgia typically gets its guy at that particular position. But I don't know that I would say, oh, heavy Georgia lean. I don't know that I could say that right now. Lucy Bowers-Boykin asking about back-to-back regular season losses. I believe that's only 2016. And, boy, what a stretch that was. I believe it was Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Florida, 3 straight losses over the course of 4 weeks. You're talking about just not fun. That was not fun. Not a fun stretch, but obviously a lot of good football came after that. All right, so R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that today. If you haven't joined our Golden Shoe Bracket Challenge, we'd love to have you join us. We'll have another day to get you in on that. I'll try to get as many people. I mean, anybody that gets it today will get you in there. And I'll try to be standing by even right before noon tomorrow to get you in if you have to be last minute. So we'll try to squeeze as many as we can. But everybody that's in there today, no problem with that. Even some tomorrow, we'll try to. So I will talk to you then. DawgNation Daily presented by Breda Pest Management. We will see you then, everybody.